You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
The Pegasus Spyware is under the spotlight again with an investigative report by the New York Times published on Friday, 28 January, which claims that the Indian government purchased the controversial cyberweapon, as the NYT puts it, in 2017 as part of a larger arms deal with Israel. The NYT report states that the two countries agreed on the sale of the spyware in part of a weapons and intelligence deal worth roughly $2 billion in July 2017 when PM Modi visited Israel. It also notes that since this visit, India's stance on some of its policies, like commitment to the Palestinian cause, changed, citing India's vote in support of Israel at the UN Economic and Social Council to deny observer status to a Palestinian human rights organization. And this development is big because till now, neither the Indian government nor the Israeli government have openly confirmed or denied the sale of the software to India, something which the Israeli Defense Ministry would have had to give a license for, even though it was made by a private entity. The centre has to date also refused to take a clear stand in court or in parliament on whether it has acquired or used the spyware. The revelations in the New York Times are of particular interest after reports by a consortium of media organizations around the world in July 2021, the Pegasus project, reported of its use. These reports were based on a list of potential targets of the spyware, some of which were confirmed by forensic analysis. In India, the list of potential targets included prominent politicians, an election commissioner, 40 Indian journalists, and several private citizens. Independent forensic analysis has also been able to confirm the presence of the spyware on the phones of several of these targets. The opposition has also lashed out against the centre now, with senior Congress leader Rahul Gandhi, who was reportedly one of the targets of the spyware, saying that the government has committed an act of treason. So, how damaging are the revelations of this New York Times report? How will it fare in court? And how will this change the probe into the use of the spyware? To unpack this, I'm joined today by Vakasha Sachdev, the Quint's legal editor. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline-making news for you, and I'm your host, Himmat. So, Vakasha, I first wanted to ask if you could re-enlighten us on why Pegasus made such a big noise. Like, exactly what does it do to a smartphone? And also, where's the probe by the Supreme Court at the moment?
Right. So basically, the reason why Pegasus is such a dangerous thing, I think, one of the interesting things is the coverage of Pegasus from 2019 till now has actually all been very good in terms of being able to point this out. Is that Pegasus is supposed to be a tool for helping governments take on terrorism, big security risks, like genuine, organized crime and all. That's what, NSO advertised it for. That's what it's supposed to be able to do. That was what its main use is. I think if you read the New York Times article, they've actually pointed out some cases where that has been used. So, for instance, in taking down El Chapo, this guy in Mexico, very prominent drug cartel runner. So that is what its intended objective is supposed to be. The reason why Pegasus revelations keep making become a big deal is because it's found that this is being used against people who do not fit within that category. I mean, okay, the state is claiming people like some of the Bhima Koregaon accused against whom it's been used are actually terrorists. So, I mean, on some level, you can say, okay, maybe there's a logic there, right? But then it's been used against a whole set of other journalists, like, Paranjal Guha Thakurta, who's just basically someone who the government doesn't like. There's no criminal, he's not part of some organized criminal gang. There's no accusation that he's involved in terrorism, and yet it's been used against him. Or it's been used against opposition leaders. I mean, that was one of the huge things, right? That numbers which were used by Rahul Gandhi were being targeted were on that potential snoop list. Ashok Lavasa, an election commission officer. These are people against whom there is not even the possible argument that they're that they're terrorists or organized criminals, and the usage of Pegasus against them is being highlighted as a problem because this isn't just some benign kind of thing where you're just tracking where a mobile location is, which is also, by the way, illegal. But at least there is, you could say, what, if they're just tracking someone's location, that's not the end of the world. But what Pegasus does is it gives you control of a person's phone's camera, its microphone, and its whole file system. So not only are you able to see everything which is on the phone, you can actually manipulate that, which is, sort of the big big concern with it, and which is something which we'll return to in a bit in when we're looking at some of the other issues. Because so this is why Pegasus has been a big scare. One, the capabilities of what it does. Two, the kind of people it's been used to target. And three, I guess one other thing which one can point out is again that it's also like it's such a dangerously insidious thing is that it doesn't many other forms of malware will require you to actually click on a link, whereas Pegasus's whole its big USP is zero click exploits for phones and stuff. So these are the reasons why Pegasus, when revelations come to light, this is why they're a big deal. I mean, they're not just this is not just like the old school phone tapping or someone checking the CVR records of your mobile to see where you were at a particular
This
point.
is something like what you see in a James Bond movie or like a Jason Bourne movie.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
Yeah, and worse, right? I mean, they're still supposed to be vaguely accountable because they're a government thing. This is like, I don't know if you saw the very, very bad Batman versus Superman movie.
Yeah.
Have a thing where Batman clones Zangoon's phone, which at that time you're like, oh, Batman's doing it, so it's fine. But I mean, he's a vigilante, number one, and what he's doing is deeply invasive of that person's scrutiny. But at least that he's doing it for a guy who's you see the guy is a murderer and a criminal and a gangster.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, still, when it comes to the law, doesn't mean that this can be done. But at least, there's a reason why people will not get out.
There's a reason he's a fiction character, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a reason that's a fictional thing,
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of where the Supreme Court is, I think so. They had conducted those hearings, as you remember, back towards the end of October and then November. Actually, they'd gone on for quite a while, those hearings, as you might remember. And the thing is, the committee which was set up, the idea is that they're supposed to try and do a full technical analysis. They are currently so they're at the stage right now where they've asked people who believe their phones were compromised using Pegasus to submit their phones for analysis. There's some bit of debate over whether people should really have to submit the phones as a whole, or whether they should just be able to submit it, have an image taken, and then take it back. But I mean, that's sort of where the committee is. That's what they've publicly said they're doing right now. In addition, they've also been taking expert evidence. So I think you might have seen there's a report in the Indian Express about them taking expert evidence and affidavit. This includes these are affidavits which these are were already submitted as part of the petitions to the Supreme Court. So there were a few. So Jagdeep Chokar had submitted a petition. Then there was, I think, another one of the ones which was filed by SNM Abdi and all. So as part of these things, they had all been filing. They'd asked for experts to support their petitions, and these affidavits had been filed by these experts already with the Supreme Court. So those affidavits have been handed over, and I think further some more expert evidence from these same experts has been given over to the committee. And these are people who are India's leading sort of cybersecurity experts. So one would hope that the committee is going to take it seriously. I mean, one of the interesting things, which we were looking into when the committee was formed, was how these people were those who you might have wanted to actually be on the Supreme Court's technical committee, but because they'd already given in expert evidence, they couldn't be asked to be on the committee. So that's sort of where we are with that right now. I mean, as we've gone along, I don't know if, one of the things was the court had at that point said they want a report from the committee, within 8 weeks. I think we've gone long past that deadline. I mean, we don't know whether the committee has been sending reports and what they've done. Have they been asking for extensions of time? No, we don't know at this stage. But I mean, it looks like obviously the committee is doing its job at this point. It's unfortunately a long process, but that's sort of where we are. And the court will, I guess, take it up once they have a report.
Okay, so now moving to the New York Times report as well, which came out on Friday, which basically has uncovered that India did purchase this spyware from Israel in July 2017 as part of this gigantic $2 billion arms and intelligence deal. And when Prime Minister Narendra Modi basically went to Israel for the first time, being the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. So now we have these revelations from New York Times. Legally, how damaging or how damning are they when it comes to this probe?
So I think the big, sort of one thing to remember is that legally speaking, these reports in themselves can't act as proof, right? I mean, so the thing is, the courts do take up issues based on what they see in the media. That's one of the ways in which PILs get taken up, or suo motu cognizance is taken by the courts. But in terms of being able to legally prove that something's happened, you can't just rely on a media report. Now, if the authors of the New York Times report are able to, maybe speak to their sources. Those sources are willing to file affidavits with the Supreme Court. Now that could become evidence. So that is something which can be explored, I guess, by some of these petitioners. It can be explored, to actually try and get those sources who have provided this information to provide statements on the record. Now, if that were the case, then that becomes sort of legal proof. When that's not the case, does that mean that these revelations are irrelevant? Well, no, obviously not. But I mean, in terms of, yes, their legal value is a little bit difficult. What might be interesting to see is how the Supreme Court treats this now sort of, it's repeated confirmation in the media, right, about these issues. And whether they're going to now use this as we go forward with the government's unwillingness to provide an answer. Now, I mean, one of the issues which the Supreme Court itself highlighted in its order when it set up the creation of this committee was they pointed out, and this had gone on for like over a month. They kept asking the central government, can you submit an affidavit that whether you did or you didn't, just put that on affidavit and tell us. Now, they kept asking this from the government, and the government kept refusing. They said even denying it would be a problem, which was, I mean, I think everyone knows what that means.
Yeah.
But the question is there a point when you can start to draw adverse inferences? Now, in a civil court, if you go through the process down there, then there is a stage where you start to be able to, when you're doing evidence taking, if there is this kind of situation, you can start to draw adverse inferences, right? I mean, the Supreme Court is in a slightly tricky situation because it's not a court of fact-finding per se, unless it sets up a commission of inquiry. So they can't quite draw those inferences themselves. But they have said that they kind of want the committee which they've set up to start to look into some of this stuff. So it is possible that, the committee in its interactions with the central government can bring this up and say, look, this is there, this is there, this is there. We have the fact that the NSO has previously clarified they only sell to governments. It has to be done through an Israeli license, etc., etc., etc. Here are the license conditions. Therefore, are you going to give us an answer now or not? And once the commission, now the technical committee has got that and is asking these questions, and it then receives further lack of answer from the central government, then you reach a stage where adverse inferences can perhaps be drawn. But legally speaking, I mean, this is still, as I said, until and unless, one's able to actually get sort of affidavits from, maybe these sources who've spoken to the New York Times, or even maybe the New York Times journalists might be willing to, I mean, it's a stretch, but, if they were willing to kind of speak about this and all, affidavits from them could then have a greater legal effect. But I think the main thing is this definitely raises the thing for the Supreme Court to start being more serious about the center's unwillingness to respond. And it's, something which should be driving the committee on to insist that they want answers. And, the Supreme Court had said in its order that, they will make sure they drill down to what has to be answered, and they will press the government to answer those things, that unless and until it's absolutely, that if it's, and they said that, if you're going to claim national security, then you're going to have to back up that. You can't just say, oh, it's national security, so we can't give an answer. You have to explain why it's a national security issue which can't be answered. So, the more you get these kind of reports coming out in the press, they will certainly help the court's position in asking those questions and the committee's position in asking those questions. So I think that's sort of the most value we can look at in terms of this in the legal process.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously, in terms of the revelation itself, I mean, it's huge because we've suspected it, we've believed it, but this is, this is a reputed news organization. It doesn't just put out information on this without a confirmation. This isn't, by the way, even like a story specifically about India. So, I mean, all this nonsense, which as usual, General V.K. Singh and other, the bhakts on Twitter have already started with saying, oh, this is Supari media and all of that. And, oh, they're trying to tarnish the, India's monsoon, India's budget session. It's the dumbest thing you could ever think of as an objection. But that kind of stuff, I mean, is combated by the fact that this is actually more an indictment of the US. Like, this article is meant to be an indictment of the fact that the FBI was actually considering this.
Yeah.
And as part of that, they've delved into speaking to Israeli officials, speaking to people who were in the know about who this stuff was being sold to and how it was being done. So, this isn't targeted at India at all, no matter what the, the sort of government's defenders will try and say. So it's important because it really shines a light on what's on the way in which this cyber weapon was being marketed
Yeah.
And India is just one of the countries where this is there.
Now you spoke about like the reaction from the BJP as well, and the BJP leaders regarding it being or just the Bhakts also just it being a Supari media report. On I also saw this BJP spokesperson on NDTV who questioned the NYT on the timing of the release of this report just before the elections, and it's a bit comical why someone like the New York Times will be invested in releasing a report
Yeah,
before the
and I think,
elections. So
and the thing is, it's these guys are so, it's such a dumb response to make because of the fact that the NYT,
yeah,
the target of the NYT story is the FBI.
yeah,
It's not the Indian government. They are not they're not
yeah.
going after India, say, oh, you guys did this. Their target is the fact
Yeah.
that the FBI actually also were willing to take, to
Mhm.
consider using it in the US, which,
Yeah.
despite the rules which came into play against domestic surveillance, this kind of domestic mass surveillance after the whole Snowden fiasco. So,
Mhm.
the thing is, honestly, like, I wonder how these people really strategically think this through. Like, instead of being able to say, look, the simplest response from them should actually be, you know what, the government has not denied purchase or use of Pegasus before, nor have they confirmed it.
Mhm.
NYT can report what they want. These deals are there. That's it. There is no
Yeah.
further comment to be made. Use the same line which the Solicitor General took in court. I mean, one may agree with it or disagree with it, but it's a line which clearly said talking about that confirmation or denial of these issues is a risk to India's strategic interests. We can't get this. There's no reason to get into it. End of story.
Mhm.
But this kind of stuff to try and say that the NYT is trying to target your state elections and your session in parliament, I
Yeah.
mean, especially given that this isn't even an article which was focused on India, it's just, it's so ridiculous.
But we also saw the opposition, of course, lashing out on the center with like statements coming in from Rahul Gandhi stating that the government has committed treason, and also we got some snide comments and remarks coming from like veteran Congress leader P. Chidambaram, who in a tweet urged the Prime Minister to ask Israel for an advanced version of the spyware. Uh, Now, what also caught my attention was the action taken by the Congress's Lok Sabha floor leader, Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, who is now seeking a privilege motion to be initiated against the Minister of Information and Technology for deliberately misleading the House on the Pegasus issue. So, my question is, what are the repercussions for misleading the House? Like, how serious is this kind of a motion?
The thing is, see, these things don't really, it doesn't mean that there'll be, it's just about trying to get it on the record that there has been this kind of thing, right? These things
Hmm.
used to have, I think, a lot more symbolic value when Parliament was an actual functioning institution,
Yeah.
or in a country where this kind of thing made a big deal. Nowadays, given the polarization, even if there were a successful privilege motion which had, parliamentarians censuring them and all that wouldn't make any difference. Practically
Hmm.
speaking, in any case, it doesn't really have sort of genuine sort of impact on things. In the days when if you look at the way these kind of things came up from sort of the English Parliament and how these ideas of these kind of motions work there, it used to be actually meant to be a thing where the sheer sort of embarrassment of it all was supposed to make would encourage a prime minister to resign or a cabinet to reshuffle and all. But that
Hmm.
really doesn't happen anymore. Um, but actually, I have a slight objection to this. I think because I think the government actually has been very clear. They never did actually mislead the House. We've been actually grumbling over the fact that the government never gave a straight answer, but the government for themselves has avoided legal liability for lying or or any violation of
Hmm.
this kind of a privilege notice kind of thing, because they actually have consistently refused to answer this question properly. They've never said we didn't buy Pegasus. They've
Yeah.
every time when they made an official statement in Parliament, they've said we have not conducted unauthorized interception of communications.
Hmm.
Now, so therefore, even in a world where this privilege motion might work, they actually haven't. They haven't misled the House. They've been clear. Though, that's a slightly separate issue because and this is something which I'm assuming we're going to come to because the usage of something like Pegasus. Their get out of jail card essentially by the wording of their statements has been no unauthorized interception. So according to them, even if we used it, it's been done in an authorized manner. So therefore,
Hmm.
we've not lied to you. That's what the that's the subtext behind the way the government has framed it. Is that they're like, we're not going to tell you. And even if it's proved that it was used in an authorized manner. So you know what, like, I mean, you have there's no point to all of this, and which is why, I actually think that the Ranjan Chaudhary is wrong to claim that there's a misleading of the House. They neither misled the House, they neither misled the Supreme Court, because they just refused to answer the question, and they always gave this very obfuscatory answer. But the thing is, if we're trying to go to a world where are they being accurate or not, they perhaps, they think they're being very clever, but in a sense they're perhaps not being, because this comes back to the nature of Pegasus as a software.
Now, Vakasha, we have this NYT report which says that the Indian government has purchased the Pegasus spyware from the Israeli government in 2017. We also have this Indian Express report which was published earlier today, which has quoted a few cybersecurity experts who were deposed in front of the SC panel, who said they have found this malware or different versions of it on several phones of the targeted people. We have this mounting evidence now growing about this probable use of the spyware. My question is, to what extent can the center deny its purchase or use now? Like, what kind of evidence will be required for it to justify legally that center has used this spyware or has purchased this spyware?
The government can still, even if the technical committee proves that Pegasus was used on these phones, the government can still just not confirm or deny whether it was them who did it. And the tricky thing is going to be, does the committee have a way of being able to show that it was the government which used this? Now, what the NYT report I think was interesting on this is that it includes a mention of how in the lawsuit brought against NSO, it mentions, I'm not sure whether it was the WhatsApp one or the Apple one, it mentions that it was used. There is one example of its usage being confirmed in the US, because one of the key things was Pegasus was not supposed to be usable at all against US numbers, but the lawsuit mentions it was used against one. What the NYT article reports is that was actually, in fact, the FBI's test to see whether it worked or not. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is, I think they were able to show that the exact sort of location from where it was accessed, or where where this was viewed. So, for instance, now if the technical committee is able to get something which shows that a request for the use of Pegasus or a view of this Pegasus information which was taken off someone's phone was accessed from literally, say, within the MHA office, then maybe there's a way of kind of trying to take that. But I'm not sure if that is something which will be which can be done. If that were done, then yes, you could. Then the government's in a position where they can no longer deny or even refuse to accept that they used it. But unless and until that's something the technical committee can do. As far as I'm aware, the technical committee will only be able to find with detailed forensic examination that Pegasus was used. After that, you then have to go into the weeds of it, of either getting someone, of how it can't be sold to anyone but a government organization. Then, you have to go to that separate issue there. And I think there, as I said, the best case scenario is where you try to get someone from the NSO or from the Israeli Defense Ministry also. Good, but, they're obviously not going to, because that would threaten diplomatic relations. But those are the kind of things you have to do. So, at best, the technical committee will be able to get a confirmation that it was used, but will they be able to show who used it? As far as I'm aware, from what I've read of what can be done, I'm not sure that's possible. But maybe the NYT story, from what they pointed out here about the way it was, about how that US thing was from the FBI, maybe there's a possibility of locating it. But I don't think so at this point in time.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vakasha, for helping us understand this NYT report and the significance of it as well. And for our listeners, that's the end of the episode. At The Big Story, we have done several episodes on the Pegasus spyware issue, and you can find a link to these episodes just to catch up on the issue in our show notes. And thank you so much for listening in. If you liked listening to this episode, please subscribe to The Big Story for episodic updates. We're available on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website, and for any feedback, please shoot an email to podcast@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.